Hey, what is going on, everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and welcome back to another episode of Mario's Minute. For those who do not know, this is a podcast I do here. My second podcast, actually. My main podcast, Mod Chat, is a podcast where I come on and I talk about new things in the world of video game console modding, video game modding, just modding in general, things that I find cool, interesting, maybe some show and tell that I want to share with you all about, just all that fun stuff. However, Mario's Minute is not that. Mario's Minute is a pretty, admittedly, low-effort podcast I do, but one where I come on here, hopefully with a lot of heart, usually. Sometimes I have a guest on, sometimes I don't. I try and alternate between month to month, and I come on here once a month and talk about, well, whatever the hell I really want to. Now, this episode is going to be a guestless episode. Last month, I ended up having my friend Harcroft on, so if you are interested in anything he does in terms of original Xbox preservation, of course, any type of DLC, title updates, and any other Xbox modding projects and such, that would be a really fun episode to listen to, in my opinion. However, if you are wanting to consume more of Mario's Minute, it is available in two different forms. First of all, it is available in a video visual form here on the Mr. Mario 2011 YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey channels. Now, there's not all too much to it. It's just my channel background there with a cool-looking visualizer. At least I think it's a cool-looking one. Or if you want to take it around and listen to it in an audio-only form like an actual podcast, simply look up Mario's Minute on your favorite podcasting app, host provider, or platform, and you should hopefully be able to find it. I know it's not available on all of them, but it is available on most of them. We're about 2 minutes in here, so I feel like this is coming in a little late, but I do also want to apologize in advance for the change in audio quality if you all are noticing. Now, I don't typically have the best audio quality, right? However, I do try and pride myself on at least having something that's going to be, listenable there. And I'm just saying right now, I am currently, when I'm recording this away from home, I am using a different microphone. Admittedly, I'm actually going gamer on here using I think like a Kingston HyperX headset with the microphone and all that. I ended up using it for some work stuff that I had to do before, and it was a personal purchase, so I've been able to keep it, and it's worked well for that, but definitely sounds like a very gamer headset, looks like a very gamer headset, but I will do my best to get some tweaking, get some audio quality tweaks and mastering and such done, just so it doesn't really sound like I'm talking to you all through a gamer headset. But if there is a change in audio quality that you all are noticing, don't worry, next month it should be better. However, in regards to this here, we're going to be talking about a few different topics. And I will say, when I looked at my topics list, I was kind of looking at this like, wow, May 2024 has been a long month because this feels like it was so long ago. But the first thing I did want to talk about was limited run games. Now, I ended up doing a full video about this, and if you want to check that out, I would recommend doing so. But this is in regards to limited run games, 3DO games that they are selling, and the limited run games quite literally burning their customers. What am I talking about here? Well, if you haven't picked up on it, Limited Run Games, for the people who are uninitiated, don't know about it, is a company that I think started off with some pretty awesome intentions. Now, I'm going to maybe mix up some of the names, some of the publishers and all that, so do forgive me on there. But Limited Run Games themselves are primarily a publisher of games. They really aren't a developer. However, there were a few people from, I believe it was Mighty Rabbit Studios, who had a few small indie games they had put up for the PlayStation Vita and the PlayStation 4, I believe, but it was primarily the Vita at first. And they were going to be closing their doors, they were going to be running out of money, but they wanted to preserve their games, not just putting it on PlayStation Network, because they knew that PlayStation Network was going to eventually go down. People would not be able to purchase those games, that you don't really get proper ownership of a game if it is digital only. I mean, we've seen time and time again with storefronts going down, accessibility being taken away from us, and even content being stripped away completely, that when you own something digitally, you really don't own it. It's more of a renting that you're doing. And there's even entire places, I believe, like legally in Australia, and I hope I'm getting that correct, but I believe legally in Australia, they classify digital purchases as rentals. Like, it is law, it is written that when you purchase a digital good, you are not purchasing that thing to own. You are essentially renting it because, like I said, the people who you purchase it from can always take that back. They can always disable it. However, if you have a working console and you have a cartridge and it is 50 years in the future, It's going to be a lot harder to do that, which is why what they were doing is before they were shutting down shop, they ended up opening up limited run games. They were already developers. Mighty Rabbit Studios was the developers, but the publishers, they opened up this publishing house, is what I'm trying to say, limited run games. They were able to get a small run pressing of Breach and Clear, one of the first games, and they were essentially saying, look, even if we shut our doors, go out of business, and never come back, we want our game to be physically preserved and out there. And it was a success because it was something that was, well, limited, as they say in the title right there. So it was successful. It was from there. And it was something that really interested me. Now, there's been many problems that people have had against limited run games. Some people haven't liked how they've handled certain situations. Some people haven't liked how some of the creators or employees have come across. Some people have felt burned, not literally in here, but some people have felt burned by some of the decisions that were made. I know one of them was, for example, Streets of Rage 4. When Streets of Rage 4 was getting released, it was going to be a digital game, and then Limited Run Game was going to be doing a physical release. So logically, many people said, crap, this is going to be a limited release game. I have to physically pick up a copy. And then months and months and months later, there were other non-limited run pressings of Streets of Rage 4. So there was some criticism behind that on there because some people, again, felt burned. I'm going to say that a few times when they were saying, well, we end up buying from Limited Run because we thought that this was going to be a truly limited thing that I'd only have one time to purchase and I wouldn't be purchasing it again. Why is it that now people can just go to a shop and buy these games? Not so much trying to gatekeep, but more just saying, well, if I knew there was going to be non-limited run pressings, I wouldn't have given Limited Run my money. That's what I'm trying to say there with everything. Some people haven't liked the game choices that they've done. People haven't liked the long waiting times, the very, very long waiting times that have exponentially increased on those games. And I'm saying this as a customer of limited run games as well too. Although I will say that has changed because what Limited Run used to do is they would press up an order of games and they would have the inventory on hand, sell the inventory, and that's why if you bought a game from Limited Run Games years ago, you would get it within a few weeks. Because if there was only 2,000 copies of a game, they already had those 2,000 copies pressed, and then they sold them to you, and then you would get it shipped. Now they do a pre-order system where they open up pre-orders for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, and you can order as many copies as you want. You can order 1 copy, you can order 10,000 copies. Then once the orders have been completed, the pre-orders, they end up closing purchases, and then they get those pressed up. So then you have to go through the entire waiting process of getting any finalization done, getting the discs, the cartridges made, getting all that certified, getting it shipped, getting it packaged, getting it reshipped, repackaged to the customers and everything. So that's why it takes so long, because you are pre-ordering a product that does not exist at the time, as opposed to years ago when their model was you would purchase something that has already been created. Hopefully that makes sense. I personally like that, and I don't mind the wait times as someone who ordered many, many things overseas many, many times for a long time now, well over 20 years. I don't really mind it all too much. Sometimes you kind of forget what you order, which can be a little bit annoying, but I think maybe one of the other criticisms I'm thinking of too is there's many games where even with all that, the limited run pressings really aren't limited per se. Not only you have big retailers such as Best Buy who are purchasing from Limited Run has contracts with them. So if you buy a Limited Run game from Best Buy, sometimes you can get it sooner than someone who bought from Limited Run Games, although you're going to get a different cover and such. But if you're like me, it doesn't matter because you're really just buying it for the physical content itself. On top of that, there's also been developers who have done pressings with Limited Run, and then they go and do pressing with another company. So again, at that point, if you're going to do multiple pressings, why did I purchase the limited run copy to begin with? So that's how people have gotten burned. You're going to understand why I'm saying that here. But this most recent action here was something that I personally found completely inexcusable, and it gets worse as we look at it. So Limited Run, for several years now, has been branching out into other types of console pressings. Not only they were working primarily with the PlayStation Vita and the PlayStation 4, but of course they've gotten into PlayStation 5, they've gotten into Switch, They got into the Xbox consoles as well. So not the older ones, but the newer ones like Xbox One, Xbox Series. However, the big thing they've done is they've also gone back in the past where they were doing N64 games, Game Boy games, Game Boy Color games, Game Boy Advance games, soundtrack CDs, vinyl soundtracks. I don't remember if they've done Genesis, actually. I know they did original Nintendo. But when it comes down to this here, we're talking about 3DO. And I know they've done some PC stuff, and I think they've also done Sega CD. But all of this essentially means for mainly the Sega CD, but the 3DO here, they're able to do repressings of these games because, one, they end up getting the rights to do it. So some people might be wondering when it comes to a 3DO game, why should I buy it through limited run as opposed to just buying a used copy? Well, if you buy a used copy, you might have to pay more sometimes. You are also getting a used version. Plus, if somebody is wanting to support that project in a way, they're able to. Because if Limited Run represses a 3DO game, for example, they have gone through all the legal hurdles and the rights holders and everything, and they have the right to make a pressing of that game. And the nice thing is with a console like the 3DO, for example, it doesn't have anti-copy protection. So that is why on consoles such as the 3DO, you can quite literally, if you wanted to, grab an ISO of a game, burn it to a CDR, and it should hopefully play within your 3DO. It's not like something like the PlayStation, which requires a swap trick or a soft mod of some kind or a mod chip installation. So that's how that is there, just kind of getting that out of the way. So some of those consoles that don't have any kind of anti-piracy, anti-copy measures, or they've been defeated for so long, that's why they've been able to do these pressings, including some of the cartridge ones here. So getting into this, what am I talking about with the 3DO? Well, there were a couple 3DO games that were getting some pretty nice looking, in my opinion, repressings, and they were, officially unofficial is what I call it. They're official reproductions, I guess you could say, because in my mind, they are still reproductions, which is just, like a silver or like a copy. It's not like an official 3DO run from back in the day. However, it does have the developer's permission to do this. So there was two games, Plumbers Don't Wear Ties and D. Now, I have never played either of those games, and the main one we're going to be focusing on is D, because it has been confirmed, thankfully, that this issue has not impacted the Plumbers Don't Wear Ties release. Essentially, what happened was when you purchase one of these games, and I'm still shocked at this, because you don't see this happen with any other games. You don't really see it happen with any other companies. And even if it happens with another company, it's a small developer or it's a really small company and they disclose it. And Limited Run does not have a history of doing this in particular, which is why people did not run under this assumption here. It was never disclosed at all, but Limited Run quite literally burned their customers on D. They burned D for their customers. I'll stop making the jokes here. They shipped out the game D for the 3DO on CDRs. They were not pressed discs. And one thing I neglected to mention in my video was that this special edition of D, that it had a box, it had a manual, it had all this other extra stuff. It also had a soundtrack CD as well. The soundtrack CD was actually pressed onto CDs. They were pressed in a factory. But the D game itself, the thing that people cared about, the thing that people actually wanted to play if they chose to play it, because some people, I do want to say, some people were saying it doesn't matter because collectors buy these, they're shelf pieces, they're never going to play them. No, I actually saw many people who were purchasing this because they wanted to play it, because they wanted to play this game and support I believe one YouTuber on here, Video Game Esoterica, he was very passionate about it because credit to him, but he is a huge lifelong fan of D, and he said, I put my money down and I purchased this because they went through all the rights holders, they went through all the legal hurdles, they ended up doing this here, and I want to put my money down to support this project so we would hopefully get more D-related projects in the future. This is something that I wanted to support, but not in this way here, getting it in this form. Plus, CDRs are going to be harder to read on a game system. That's just a fact right there. So even if people want to play it, they would rather use their laser and use their disk drive on a pressed CD that is going to be higher quality as opposed to a CDR version of the game, which if they were just going to play the game on a CDR, they could have just downloaded the game from the internet, burned the ISOs onto CDRs, and then been done with it at that point. However, that's what happened there. People started getting their copies of D in the mail, and they notice, and it's very obvious. If you've ever looked at the bottom of a CD, look at the bottom of a pressed CD, like a music CD you'd find in a store. Look at the bottom of a CDR that has content burned to it. Immediately you can tell what a CDR is. I've always been able to discern it with 100% certainty. Like ever since I noticed the difference when I was a kid, it's very obvious. But even if you don't believe your eyesight there or anyone else's eyesight, people were taking their discs, putting them into their computers. They were verifying them with some, checking software and such. And the software they were using was able to verify that it was indeed a CDR. It was not a CD-ROM. So it was even more damning there. And some people might say, okay, well, if the game works, it's fine. But the big problem is that these games weren't working. This is actually something I did not know about. The 3DO does not have anti-copy protection. I've known about that for a long time. I did not know that there is so many different variants of the 3DO that some of them run CDRs perfectly fine and other ones cannot read a CDR at all. So there are entire groups and sets of people who have 3DO consoles that are simply not capable of reading a CDR disc. So they are SOL when it comes to this. They cannot play these copies of D on their system. So they end up unknowingly purchasing a CDR disc-based version of a game, paid a good amount of money for it. I believe before taxes, before shipping and handling, it was $64.99 US dollars. And I looked at it on eBay as well too. And for that price, you can get a complete copy of D, the original pressing, cheaper. Used, mind you, but you can get it cheaper than if you bought it through limited run games. So people were incredibly upset by this. And I simply don't know what Limited Run was thinking. I don't know why they did this. I don't know why the transparency was not there. I will say there are a few sources I want to cite. The first person I ever saw this news from was Todd Gill of Retro Frog, where he was on Twitter, and he said, LOL, Limited Run Games is shipping out 3DO games on CDR rather than press discs. And the best part, they won't even work on real hardware. Now, Limited Run Games did end up responding to this here. And they initially were saying in a reply on Twitter, not even a big tweet type thing, but they said, we are actively working with our disc replication partners to provide replacement press discs for our 3DO customers. In the meantime, any D the Game customer can request a full refund by visiting limitedrungames.com/support. Please note that the only game currently experiencing issues is D, the Collector's Edition for 3DO. Buyers of this title have been reached out to via email. And that is what I don't understand. Limited Run Games, they also ended up coming out with a statement later, essentially saying that they tried to work with their disc replication, partner and such, to get discs replicated for the 3DO. And they were not having success with 3DO pressed discs. However, what they did was they instead ended up burning the 3DO games to CDR, and they claimed that from their testing, they believed that it was professionally done and the results were satisfactory. So that's why they felt comfortable shipping these out. I don't know how, I don't know why they didn't communicate this. They didn't think that this just wouldn't blow over. I simply don't understand that logic, because in their statements, they prove right there that they were aware that this was not an accident that was done. When you're doing all of this, even I'm not in the industry, and I understand that when you're doing all this, you don't just accidentally burn your game to a CDR as opposed to pressing it. You don't accidentally send out a burned CD as opposed to a pressed CD for many, 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 many copies of games that have been done up here. You don't. And some people were even trying to sympathize with Limited Run and say, well, getting discs run and discs pressed and everything, it can be costly, and you can ask, lower lower indie devs or indie artists and such who want to get their CDs and their albums and their EPs pressed and everything. Here's the thing: Limited Run Games, they're not new to pressing discs. Plus, they're bringing in enough money, I'm sure. They've had the network, they've had the infrastructure, they've had the relationships, they've had the partners. They've been able to do all this, and they've sold games at a loss, from what I understand as well too. I believe Axiom Verge on the Wii U, they were taught, and they as in Limited Run Games, I think it was when Josh is still there, and Doug used to be there. Those were the two founders. But I remember like they would be, sending out tweets about it and such, and it was such a headache in getting everything done. They had essentially said, look, we kind of just want this release out the door, and we have spent so much time and effort and money on this. We're selling this game at a loss, but we just want this to be done. So it wouldn't be the first time they did this. I do know years ago, I don't remember which release it was, but there was a PC limited run release that they were doing, and it sold so poorly that they still sent out the physical packaging and such, but as opposed to sending out a pressed DRM-free version of the game, they ended up sending out a Steam key of the game. But it was such little sales that it really didn't make that much of a splash, as opposed to what the 3DO thing did right here. There's no excuse for this. I think it's unacceptable. And again, I think the most shocking thing with their statements is that I will say something good. They did the right thing here in that they are offering their customers a full refund. If you purchase D, it sounds like you get to keep it and you get to keep the packaging and everything else, but you're going to get a full refund. So thankfully, you're not out of that money. But that's the only good thing that happened here. Aside from that, it is despicable, and it's really disgusting, in my opinion, that they are so established for so long, they've been doing this here, and that they knew about this well in advance. And I don't know if they just thought that they were testing this on like 2 or 3 3DOs and it would be fine, and then they sent it out and they were going to see what was going to happen. I don't know if they thought that it was barely going to make a splash. I don't know if they thought that people weren't going to notice. I don't know what they were thinking. I really don't. And for people who might not understand, how silly that might be here, we're talking about physical media, right? Now, funny enough, I'm going to bring this up, but places like Best Buy are starting to phase out physical media. But that's all to say, you want to buy a movie on Blu-ray, right? There's a movie that you've been looking forward to. And a Blu-ray might be $15, $20, and you want to go out, you want to support it. So the day it comes out, you go to Best Buy, you buy a brand new sealed copy of this movie on Blu-ray. You take it home, you open it up, and it's not a pressed Blu-ray disc. It is a burned Blu-ray disc. But not only that, not only you got a burned Blu-ray disc of this movie that you ended up going out of your way to legally acquire, pay for, and actually put money down on to support and have in your collection. When you take the disc and you put it in your Blu-ray player or your Xbox or your PlayStation or whatever it is, it doesn't even work. It's about as ridiculous as that. And then you go back to Best Buy and they say, oh, well, we ended up our partner who did this, they end up testing it and it seemed to work fine on, their testing and such. But then you even try to go back to the rack to buy another copy, maybe it messed up, and it's no. Every single copy of this movie that has been pressed and sent out was actually burned onto a disc. Like, that would be unacceptable. That nobody would be okay with that. So I don't think anybody should ever give Limited Run a pass for this here. And they have definitely broken a lot of trust with the community here. I can say that as well too. I haven't been as interested in Limited Run recently. I still buy from them occasionally. I think it's more just like the game selection hasn't really interested me as much. But even so, for me, there's times where when I do see something, I just say, funny enough with the Best Buy example, Best Buy's going to have it. I'm just going to wait. I'd rather just buy it from Best Buy when they have it all ready to go. I don't have to wait as long. And that's a sad thing too. A lot of people end up seeing it in shops at Best Buy, their limited run releases, earlier than their mailbox. So limited run coming under fire for quite literally burning their customers in 2024 is something that I never thought I would see, but that's how it is there. I ended up, let me see, I'm looking at my topics list here. Another thing that a company ended up doing was, PlayStation here. They also had a little bit of an oopsie, I would say. This is with Helldivers 2. Now, I don't have the full grasp of this. So for anybody who has really gone into this here, my apologies if I mess up some details in advance. But in short, I kind of want to talk about like the overarching picture here. In short, Helldivers 2 several months ago ended up releasing. I believe it's on PlayStation and PC. And widely acclaimed game. People are having so much fun with it. People are loving it, having a fantastic time with it. And to my understanding, it was not the developers who imposed this. The game itself, it's being sold on PC, it's being sold on Steam, but several months after it was being sold, Sony ended up putting a limitation on it in which they said that in order to continue to own and play this game, you have to tie your Steam account and your game to a PlayStation Network account. And the other side effect this had is that it had to be a PlayStation Network account in a supported country. And there was about 200 countries, let's say, that this was not possible with. So there were going to be many customers out there, paying customers who've been playing the game, who've been enjoying it, who were going to be locked out of their purchase simply because of where they were geographically located. And it wasn't even their fault, because when they bought the game, they went onto Steam, they purchased the game, they were able to download it, they were able to play it with no issue. They didn't use a VPN, they didn't use a proxy, they didn't go to a key site, they didn't do anything nefarious, is what I'm saying on here. And even, apparently, if you do something like that, like let's say you're in a unsupported country, and you use a VPN to VPN yourself into a supported country and then continue to play this game, you're at risk of being banned. So you have all these people who are locked out of their purchase. Now, here's the thing with the community, right? Specifically the PC community. They don't like to sit down for things like this. If there's something that the PC community does not like, they will take a hard and firm stance on it. Well, hard stance, I should say. Hard, firm are going to be different, but they will take a hard stance on it. And the best example I can think of was years ago when, during the Xbox 360's heyday, you of course had Xbox Live Silver and Xbox Live Gold. Xbox Live Gold, it was $50, then $60 per year, and it would allow you to play online. And then Microsoft was kind of, starting to do almost like the beta or prototype phase of doing Xbox on everything, Xbox as a service as opposed to a platform, right? So they had something called Games for Windows Live, which was a service that you would tie onto games, and some games were actually cross-compatible. For example, Shadowrun, you could play on PC or you could play on Xbox 360, and PC and 360 players could actually play together, which was really cool. But I thought it was cool, at least aesthetically. It essentially brought up like an Xbox 360 type guide on your computer when you were playing those games. And you could sign into your gamer tag on your PC and you could play those games, so you could be signed into your Xbox 360 account on PC. Games for Windows Live wasn't a super great platform. It wasn't a super great service. I kind of just liked it for the aesthetic on there, and I just thought, ooh, it's really cool that you can link your gamer tag on here. But I'm not praising it as a service is what I'm saying. However, it did have something that PC players hated at the time. They could tolerate the account, they could tolerate the gamer tag, they could tolerate the UI, but what they did not tolerate was the fact that if you were on PC and you played a game with Games for Windows Live support, if you wanted to play that game's multiplayer, like Halo 2, for example, Halo 2 Vista when that dropped, if you wanted to play Halo 2 Vista online and just do matchmaking and multiplayer, you had to pay for Xbox Live Gold. So for a lot of PC players, this doesn't make sense because they said, well, one, I already bought the game. Why should I pay for online play? Two, why should I pay for an Xbox Live account when I don't care about Xbox at all? This is ridiculous. So it did not go over well at all. And what did PC players do? Well, most of them just didn't play online. Because, again, most PC players were on PC. They didn't have a 360. They didn't care about Xbox. So to them, it made no sense to pay for this network to play this subset of games online when they could just play other games. And even if they were playing Games for Windows Live enabled games, they ended up usually just playing the single player on there, and they didn't want to do the multiplayer. And it went over so poorly that I don't know how quick it was, but I remember it was quick. Within a quick amount of time, Microsoft ended up reversing that decision for PC. Now, for Xbox 360 players, if you wanted to play online, you still needed to pay for Xbox Live Gold. That did not change at all. But for PC players, Games for Windows Live was completely free at that point. If you wanted to play single player, you just had to buy the game. If you wanted to play multiplayer, you just had to buy the game. That was it. And that's how it should have been from the get-go on there. And that was many, many years ago. So again, the PC market, it's bigger now. It's better now than it was before. And people put their foot down on this. So it was even to the point where thankfully Valve is, for the most part, pretty pro-consumer on here. And I will say that a lot of it is because of the CEO, Gabe Newell. So whenever he steps down, I'm a little nervous about what's going to happen with Valve. But what they end up doing on Steam was that they ended up graciously having a really good return policy. Because this change for Helldivers 2 was done so late into the life cycle of the game, and the game is not even that new, but the point is, people bought it on launch or close to launch, and they enjoyed it for months, and then had this, for all intents and purposes, DRM imposed on the game itself that limited them. Valve ended up allowing people to return the game. It didn't have, a 2-hour window. It didn't have a 2-week window. They said, no, even if you've been playing the game every single day for the past 2 months and you have 300 hours in it, if you want a refund of the game, go through this process, you'll get a full refund of the game. Like, that's how big it was there. What ended up happening, though, was PlayStation ended up coming out. I believe they said this, and actually it was going to be at the end of this month. This episode is going to be going out on the 29th, and this would have happened on the 30th. But on May 5th, PlayStation tweeted out and said, Helldivers fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linking update. The May 6th update, which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linking for new players and for current players beginning May 30th, will not be moving forward. We're still learning what is best for PC players, and your feedback has been invaluable. Thanks again for your continued support of Helldivers 2, and we'll keep you updated on future plans. So that was a big limitation that ended up almost being imposed, was not imposed, so that's good. The problem is that was the more sensationalized and more bigger, I know not the best terminology there, but that was the biggest issue in terms of media coverage on here. What has not been covered and what has been kind of swept under the rug, and what the Helldivers 2 developers are trying to work on and fix, is that the limitation of locking out all of those countries is still in effect. And I don't believe that has been fixed up at this point, which that is an absolute shame as well too. Because at this point, excuse me, you have locked out all these players and potential players who have paid for your game or were looking to pay for your game for no reason at this point. They were locked out because of the PlayStation Network account linking issue. But now that you don't need a PlayStation Network account to play Helldivers 2 on PC, there's no reason for those countries to be locked out. And that's incredibly unfortunate. So I'm not sure what's going to happen from here. I really hope the developers get this ironed out, but the problem I'm seeing is that the coverage is really not as big as what it was before. And the big issue and the big piece of coverage that everybody was freaking out the most about, which even I'm guilty of, I talked about it mostly on here for this segment, was the part about the PlayStation Network linking, not the part about the countries being locked out. And as I said, to what I understand to this point, those countries are still locked out. And at least me looking at it, I don't see a point to locking those countries out. It's really unfortunate. I guess we've been talking about, some bad, not so great news here and ranting a little bit. And it's just been one of those episodes here, but those are really the main topics I wanted to cover. So this one's going to be a little bit quicker here, this episode. But the next thing I wanted to talk about was which games I have been playing here recently. So this one, I'm just kind of bringing up my Switch here. I haven't played it yet, but I have said on Twitter, still call it that, I'm not calling it by its new name, the Spirit Hunter series is a visual novel series that I absolutely love. And I think I have a soft spot for it because it was my first one. My first one was Deathmark, and the second one was NG, and both of them just shook me to my core, and I loved them. And I've played both of them multiple times over. And a big shout out I want to say to Nick Moses05, friend of the show here. When I had him on a few months ago, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I brought up Deathmark, and he was like, Deathmark, is that the Spirit Hunter series? And I was surprised he knew about it. And I guess he does some giveaways with GOG, and or he does like some Steam key giveaways and such. And he said on there that he never played it, but he noticed he's gotten mini keys for it, and it is one of his most requested games. When people win a Steam key, he gives them an option, and he said he consistently gives away the Spirit Hunter games. And he didn't know anything about them. He said they look cool, but he didn't know anything about them. So I'm not sure if he'll try it. Hopefully he does at one point. That's all to say, though. Spirit Hunter Deathmark 2 ended up coming out, a sequel I've been waiting years for. I ended up picking it up. I was happy about it. I haven't played it yet, though. I need to kind of get into a visual novel mode for that. So why am I bringing it up here? Well, because Deathmark 2 came out, and I'm excited still. I actually started playing a little bit of Animal Crossing, New Horizons. I started playing a little bit of that again because my girlfriend has now been hooked on it. She was playing it a little bit here and there, but she's kind of been using it to relax, to enjoy herself, to have some fun. And the main thing is she ended up learning how to fish in the game. She is not a fishing person at all, but it frustrated her so much because she couldn't get fishing down. So there were so many times she would have to give me her Switch and I would have to do fishing for her. But now that she got it down, it was like when she finally kind of popped that bubble, she was able to kind of just go all in. And she's just been playing tons and tons of Animal Crossing, and it's been cute to see. One thing is, though, she started getting into the turnip market, and she hasn't been very happy with that, to the point where she bought some turnips. She was upset. She's telling me about it. She bought some turnips for $110 a turnip, and then the price started going down and down and down, down. And I said, you need to check in the morning and afternoon, and they kept going down. And then it got to the point she started eating them. So we're going to have to do something about it. I did tell her that, I can run a mod at Switch, and I can run a homebrew app called Turnips, where it just goes through and it shows like all the pricing for the turnips and all that, so I can at least see on my island. And if my island has a better turnip sell price time, then she can come over and sell them. So we'll probably figure something out there with that. Saints Row 4 Remastered, one of my best friends and I, we've been using this as a game for several months now during our game night, that if it's just us two, we end up playing that, and we end up finishing it. There was one night we end up staying up later than expected because we end up starting the final mission, and we failed a few times, so we were able to finish it on there. We finished it on Switch. It was funny because when you play the game, I've played it years ago, but I played it on 360. On the Switch, it really struggles. I'll say that. And it's not necessarily an issue with the performance on the Switch itself. It's an issue of the coding, really. Because you look at other games that run beautifully on there, and even Saints Row 4, it's like, I don't remember it particularly, like I don't remember all the details, but I remember it handled much better on Xbox 360 when I played it there, as opposed to on the Switch. But the jank kind of made it more fun in some way too. So we ended up finishing that. We had some fun with it. At the end, though, because like I said, I was going to say, at least you're in a simulation when you play this game, and at the end, the simulation starts breaking. So what happened was, we're playing through it, the game is already lagging, there's already some network issues here and there, and then the game was glitching out a whole bunch, but it was glitching out on purpose. And my friend got a little freaked out, and I was like, no, don't worry, your Switch is fine, there's nothing wrong with it, there's nothing going on there, it's not failing, I got the same thing too, it's part of the game. But because, what I'm saying is, it was kind of a fourth wall thing, because the game handled so poorly on the Switch, I could definitely see how it would scare some people, which I found to be really funny there. So those were some of the games we've been playing. Yeah, I can't really think of anything else right there. But I think, let me see, I'm looking at these. I think there was another game my girlfriend and I ended up trying, like Children of Morta, I want to say. She saw it, she wanted to give it a spin. We ended up trying it. It's a cool game, but it was a little too difficult for us to play at the time. And then a little bit of Diablo 3. I think that's the other one. I was kind of convincing her to play it, and she was kind of interested. She's like, okay, well, let me see you do it. And then I fired it up, and I started playing through it, and I was like, actually, this is dangerous. I always forget why I like Diablo 3 so much, and then I start playing it, and I start getting a little too into it. So I spent, a few hours just kind of like playing through Diablo 3, but it's one of those games you can get into it as much as you want to. If you want to play Diablo 3 because you just want to do something with your hands while you're talking to someone, while there's a background thing, while you have a TV show or movie playing, whatever it is, Diablo 3 is perfect for that. If you want to get super into it and super gung-ho, Diablo 3 is also perfect for that. That's also what makes it so dangerous. And I've spent many, many, many hours on that. So since this is a solo episode, I guess I'll show a game store, or share, not show, but share a game store story. Now, for anybody who does not know, I worked at a local mom and pop video game shop for several years. It was when I was in high school. I worked there for about 2.5 years, and I both loved and hated the job. I loved it because of the coworkers and because, it was fun and the money and the experience. But the hate part is because, well, it's still a retail job at the end of it. And for about 2 years, I really didn't play video games because of that. I played here and there, but it almost kind of annoyed me to do that. So I think it was just kind of the negative connotation. But at the beginning, I played a lot of games. And then at the end, when I was leaving, I started to pick up and play a lot of games. So what ended up happening was this story, I'm going to share it with something that happened in the shop, but it's not necessarily exclusive to video games. And I'm going to tell you all this as well, too. A little bit of a warning. It might be a little vomit-inducing. So if you don't want to be sick, I'd recommend skipping this part. And this is going to be the last segment I'm going to cover on this episode here, so don't worry about it. It's been great having you for about 40 minutes here. If you're ready to maybe have your stomach turn a little bit, we're going to talk about this. So this was actually when I was done working at the game shop, right? I would go in there when I was in town, and I would visit some of my friends, my coworkers and such who still worked there. Plus, I was able to get discounts, but I would just hang out there. I would talk to them, do whatever it was. We always had a good time. Now, what happened was when I was there was one of my friends who was working behind the counter, and let's call her Sarah, right? There was another guy who was also working, and then there was one guy while I was in the store. This other guy came in, and we're going to call him Ryan. Now, the thing with Ryan and I was that Ryan and I both worked at this store before. However, he ended up leaving much quicker than I did. And I left on very good terms. They wanted me to stay, but I had to go because I was going to college in another town, and it just wasn't going to work out. But they really did miss me because I was damn good at that job. I'll say that. However, with Ryan, he was causing issues. He wasn't that great, so he actually ended up getting fired. He was not banned from the shop, but they did end up letting him go. But he would come in here. And when he was there, he had a tendency to dip. And what I'm talking about like dip, like chewing tobacco. So he would always, have a little bit of chewing tobacco, between his teeth and his gum or like his lip and all that. I don't chew. Okay. I don't. I never have. I'm never going to do it. But he would be chewing, and he would usually have like a water bottle or something that he would be spitting into. So he was there, and I remember one of the other details is that he kept like almost like, because he was like talking with it and stuff, and he'd be getting this nasty water bottle just like so close to my face. I'm just like, dude, stop. This is gross. What are you doing? So he had no tact about it. But what ended up happening was he had a smoothie. It was a big smoothie there, and he was drinking that. And then at one point he had to leave for some reason. And he ended up accidentally leaving his smoothie on the counter there. So he left, and he came back, a few hours later. But it was funny because when he had ended up leaving, it was just like, a giant like styrofoam cup with a topper and a straw and everything. My friend Sarah was behind the counter, and she's like, oh, wow, Ryan ended up leaving his drink. Oh my God, this is like still pretty full. Oh, well, it's mine now. And then she like took a sip of it, and she's like, oh, this is weird, but oh, okay, whatever, sure. So she's kind of like sipping on it, drinking it. And we're talking about it, and maybe some people listening already know where this is going. But if you don't know where this is going, let me let you know on this. We're hanging out at the store. About an hour or two passes by, right? And there was another coworker there. I can't remember which coworker it was, but he was behind the counter. Ryan ends up coming back, and his face just drops, and his eyeballs shoot wide open. And he's looking at my coworker, the male coworker, who has this drink next to him. And he was like, hey, you didn't drink that, did you? And the coworker says, oh, no, I didn't. And Ryan's like, oh, phew. Okay, thank goodness. All right, because I forgot it. I left my drink here, but I just hoped no one drank out of it because I'm going to be honest with you, like halfway through that drink, I started spitting back into it. And you could hear Sarah, she was like behind another counter and she just screams, "Oh my God!" Just screams. And we look at her and she looked sick. Like she looked green. She looked like she was going to vomit. And at that point, admittedly, I started busting out laughing. But yeah, she even said, she's like, "I was wondering why it tasted so bad. There was something wrong with it." So maybe as a piece of advice, don't drink out of other people's drinks that they leave. And even in a post-COVID world, even though it's still out there and such, and that's a whole other thing, people are probably extra horrified to hear about this. The only thing I could really say is it was like 2012, 2013-ish, something like that, somewhere around that timeline. I don't remember exactly when, but this is pre-COVID is what I'm saying. But it was still pretty gnarly even back then. So there's a disgusting game store story for you all to hopefully enjoy or maybe not enjoy. I'm not too sure about that. However, let's go ahead and wrap up this episode here. This is going to be, as I said, a little bit of a shorter episode. Usually I try to clock these solo episodes in at about an hour, but here's the thing. In all honesty, I really didn't have that many topics for this month's episode, and if I don't have that many topics, I want to talk about what I want to talk about, but I don't want to force any more out. But typically, I do like to pick a keyword or a key phrase, and if you use this keyword or key phrase in a comment on the video upload, I'll know that you've made it to the end. So, how about this? My brothers and I recently, we were looking through some like old stuff we had, and we ended up going through my brother's toy box full of stuff that they grew up with. And one thing that they loved was plushies. They absolutely love plushies, and they have a ton of them, and they're probably going to try and give away or sell a few of them or what have you. And that's not saying anything's happening here, mind you, but they're going to be doing that on their own because some of them are in still really stellar condition. But how about plushie? Let's use that. Did you like plushies growing up? Are you a plushie collector now? Do you still have an affinity for plushies? Did you not understand plushies? What was your favorite plushie? If you use the word plushie in a comment on the video upload, I'll know that you've made it to the end of this episode. Either way, that's about it for this episode of Mario's Minute. I hope you all enjoyed listening to it. I hope you all enjoyed watching if you were checking out the video visual format of this here. If you did enjoy it, a like would absolutely be appreciated. And if you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too. Either way, this is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you for listening and watching, everyone. And until next month.